Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're cracking open an ancient text that honestly reads way less like a gentle pastoral letter and a whole lot more like a gritty survival manual for a fatal spiritual emergency. We're talking about the book of Jude. For believers seeking real spiritual guidance, this text offers a fascinating, high-stakes look at what actually happens when the very foundations of faith are threatened from the inside out. We're going to explore that ultimate theological tension between human free will and divine sovereign power, starting from a place of intense individual peril and ending up in the absolute triumph of divine victory. So let's jump right in.
To really grasp Jude, you have to feel the urgent, pastoral intensity of his warning. The sources present us with this incredibly severe diatribe against internal corruption. Just imagine Jude saying to his audience, "Listen up, you who claim to walk in the light while wearing a mask of piety that hides a heart hoarding rebellion. How long are you going to treat the scandalous grace of God as a cheap shield for your own self-indulgence? You boast loudly about your spiritual freedom, yet you are completely enslaved to your base desires." See, this isn't an attack from some foreign outside enemy. This is a dark reality of internal spiritual deception happening right inside the faith community itself. All right, let's unpack this specific threat. The theological core of this entire spiritual crisis is a concept called antinomianism. Philologically speaking, this word comes from the Greek anti, meaning against, and nomos, meaning law. So, against the law. It's the perilous error of perverting God's grace into a cheap shield and a literal license for immorality. The sources describe these ungodly individuals who essentially snuck into the community, and their goal? To convince believers that, hey, because we're under the covenant of grace, moral laws just don't apply to us anymore. But instead of genuine Christian liberty, this deception leads straight into destructive chaos and total enslavement to fleeting impulses.
Jude does not mince words here. He draws a stark, unyielding contrast, aggressively differentiating between authentic grace and this cheap shield. Authentic grace, you see, is meant to be a divine power for transformation and holy living. It actually changes your behavior. But the false teachers, they use the concept of grace as a twisted excuse. They weaponize it for their own fleshly autonomy, putting on this mask of piety to justify their own ungodly desires and self-indulgence. Ultimately, the text reveals that by doing this, they are functionally denying Jesus Christ as their only sovereign and Lord.
Jude wants to prove, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that absolutely no one can outsmart the Almighty's judgment. So he maps out what the sources call the ancient ruins of rebellion. First, think about the Israelites. They were miraculously rescued out of Egypt, yet destroyed for their unbelief. Then, there were the angels of radiant majesty, who actually abandoned their proper domain and are now locked in bottomless darkness. And finally, historical figures like Cain, Balaam, and Korah, who were characterized by murderous ego and these silent mutinies. The message here is crystal clear. The cosmic certainty of ruin awaits anyone who treats God's truth with casual compromise.
To really drive the danger home, Jude profiles these false teachers using some highly visual, brilliant natural metaphors. Read this quote with me. "Waterless clouds blown about by the wind, promising refreshing rain, but leaving the spiritual ground parched and dead." Wow, that perfectly illustrates the philosophical emptiness of their corrupted grace. He also describes them as fruitless autumn trees. They promise you absolute spiritual freedom and enlightenment, but they deliver a complete void, leaving you spiritually parched. It's the dangerous illusion of substance masking the reality of absolute emptiness.
And the villain profile gets even more treacherous here. They're called hidden reefs lurking in the fellowship. Now, the true danger of a hidden reef is that it exists completely unseen beneath the surface of seemingly calm waters, right? These individuals operate from the inside out. They take sacred communal spaces like fellowship meals and turn them into dangerous, invisible traps of deception. They just wait to shipwreck the faith of the weak and unsuspecting people who literally have no idea that theological rot is sitting right next to them at the table.
Okay, so how do you actually survive this? Well, we're shifting the narrative arc now from the descent right into the battle. Jude pivots from this stark condemnation of the ungodly and delivers a pastoral exhortation. And let me tell you, this isn't just some abstract theological debate. This is a tactical survival guide designed specifically to empower your human agency and your spiritual fortitude. Let's look at exactly what this defense strategy entails.
So the crucial point here is this threefold strategy for internal fortification. Number 1, build your life on the rock-solid foundation of the holy faith once entrusted to you. Number 2, ignite your prayer life in the power of the Holy Spirit. A lukewarm spirit simply is not going to survive this kind of emergency. And number 3, anchor your drifting soul in God's relentless love. This is an active, daily protocol. You have to maintain absolute personal purity to keep from being swept away into the destructive chaos of moral compromise.
But here is a massively vital takeaway from the sources. Spiritual survival is an interdependent endeavor. Perseverance in the book of Jude is definitely not a solitary retreat. You don't just lock yourself in a bunker somewhere and hope for the best. No, it requires intense communal vigilance. You have an active responsibility to look out for those in your community who are wavering under the weight of doubt, the ones being misled by those empty, waterless clouds we talked about just a minute ago.
In fact, Jude calls for what is essentially an aggressive rescue mission. First, you have to show mercy to those who are wavering. Second, you must act with absolute urgency to snatch the vulnerable right out of the spiritual fire. This is really the climax of human effort in the text, a high-stakes rescue where believers have to aggressively pull each other out of the flames of deception. But notice a very vital condition here. You must maintain extreme personal purity while reaching into that chaos. You have to save them without getting burned by the deception yourself.
Now, this brings us to a wildly fascinating philosophical and theological paradox: the tension between human free will and divine sovereign power. On one hand, we have human responsibility, right? Believers are commanded to contend earnestly, to build themselves up, and to snatch others from the fire. But balancing this out is divine sovereignty. The sources make it super clear that while human effort is fiercely required on the ground, it is ultimately the absolute power of God that secures the victory. Spiritual security isn't an excuse for complacency, sure, but our human striving isn't what ultimately saves us either.
As we transition into the ascent, lifting out of the gritty human struggle, we are met with this majestic, resounding truth. Rely wholly on the only true God, who possesses the absolute power to keep you from stumbling. I mean, what a comfort for the faithful. The struggle is ancient, the conflict is cosmic, and the stakes are terrifyingly high. But the victory belongs entirely to the sovereign God.
And that brings us to the grand finale of Jude's Mandate, known as the cosmic doxology. By the way, that term stems from the Greek doxia, meaning gloria, and logia, meaning saying or expression. After all these intense warnings about ancient ruins and hidden reefs, the text resolves in pure, radiant light. God's sovereign power totally triumphs over the world's wild waves and destructive chaos. He promises to present his people blameless before his glorious throne with exceeding joy. It's a stunning contrast, really. From the dark, bottomless ruin of the rebels, straight to the joyful, blameless presentation of the faithful before the Almighty.
Which leaves us with one final, incredibly vital question to reflect on. In a world of destructive chaos, where false teachings are constantly offering cheap shields and waterless clouds, are you relying on your own strength to survive? Or are you actively resting in the only sovereign who actually has the power to keep you from falling? Take a moment to just let that sit with you. Take that question with you as you continue to build on your rock-solid foundation. Thanks so much for joining me in this explainer, and keep pursuing the truth.